The following stories are from members of Hanmaum Church in South Korea. They aired on a Korean Christian TV network called C Channel and were dubbed in English.
Hello, I am Myung-Shin Seo from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. When I saw my older brother commit suicide, I longed for death too. Whenever I would encounter frustration in my life, I would think, I want to die. While living on the edge of death's cliff, I met the risen Jesus and I was freed from all of the problems in my life, and I want to share this testimony today. When I was a child, my older brother committed suicide. Though it was my first time seeing a dead person, I wasn't afraid at all. When my older brother was alive, he was depressed and full of anxiety, but in death, he looked so peaceful and happy. He looked like he had gone into a deep sleep, and to me, he didn't look like he was dead at all. From then on, whenever I was having a hard time, I would think about death. I would think that if I died, I could come out of those unsolvable problems and enter a fairy tale-like world of happiness. For me, death was like an escape route. I watched my parents live in grief after my brother died. To try to make them happy, I studied hard and did everything on my own without being told. My parents had always told me, "You should be a teacher when you grow up." It was my parents' dream for me to be a teacher, and I thought that I could be a great influence on children who were our future, so I entered a teacher's college. I attended college basically on my own. My tuition was paid for through scholarships, and I worked part-time to cover my living expenses. To me, university wasn't romance, but hard reality. As I pursued my goal by my own strength and without anyone's help, there were many instances that were hard to bear. In those times, I would remember the last time I saw my brother and think about committing suicide. When I was attending teachers' college, I went on a trip to Sorak Mountain during monsoon season and fell into deep water in a valley. Though other people were panicking, I thought, finally, I'm dying. When I thought about entering the world of death that I'd looked forward to so much, I felt so happy. The water felt so warm and comfortable like a mother's bosom, and I was ready to drown in the water without resisting. But my boyfriend leapt in and quickly rescued me. Rather than being thankful, I was actually a little angry because I thought I had lost the opportunity to die. I had big fantasies about becoming a teacher because I thought that I could please my parents and also fulfill my dreams through it. But when I encountered the reality of teaching in a school as a student teacher, my fantasies were shattered and I was so disappointed. School wasn't what I had expected. The goals I had set for myself and chased at the cost of even my health became undesirable to me. While my fellow students were up all night preparing for their teacher certification exam, I would go to funeral parlors. Sometimes I would go around cemeteries and read the writing on the tombstones. I would also watch families in crematoriums weeping and looking at the ashes of their loved ones, and I would think about life and death. I'd lost my dreams, I'd lost my goals, and I felt like I had no more reason to live. While I was thinking of suicide, I got to know about Hanmaum Church through a friend. I had lived a religious life for a long time, but Hanmaum Church was fresh, and the message filled me with grace. As I restarted my faith, my suicidal thoughts disappeared, and I obtained my teaching qualification, fulfilling my dream of being a teacher. And through answered prayer, I also got married to my husband. I thought that I'd finally found life's happiness, but even that was just for a short while. During my school days, whether it was studying, sports, music, or speech, there was nothing I couldn't do. But when it came to married life, I was clueless. I couldn't cook without a recipe, and I was completely lost on how to raise my own children, so I had to read books on infant care. And since I didn't know how to match clothes when I shopped for my husband and children, I'd think to myself, the clothes on the mannequin are nice, and I'd take the full set, including the shoes. I was inflexible and stubborn to a fault. Although I couldn't cook properly, we didn't eat out because I thought it unhealthy, so I tortured my family with the same food every day. I should have just stuck to studying, I would think, as I tell myself I had gotten married for no reason. I was hopeless at housework, and as it piled up, I grew frustrated and hated it. Then another problem arose aside from the difficulty of housework. My health, which was already weakened from my intense college life, hit rock bottom after I gave birth. During the years I was raising my children, I lived like a zombie. I would visit the emergency room often, and I was always taking traditional herbal medicine. I drank so much medicine that later, if I even smelled a hint of it, I would feel like vomiting. And though my doctor told me not to have a second child, I ignored his advice because I thought my first child would be lonely. I was so run down that I couldn't live a normal life, so my husband did all the household chores for me. Cleaning and doing the dishes were a given, and since I would sleep as soon as I came home from work, he also raised our second child. I was so thankful towards him, but then he said he wanted a third child, even though he knew my state. I couldn't understand him at all. I thought, does he not see that I'm at the brink of death? Is having a child more important than me? My heart was heavy and I began doubting that he loved me. As trust for my husband crumbled, I stopped depending on him and I hardened my heart towards him. As our children grew up, my strength gradually recovered, but I constantly complained and grumbled. As a child, I had done everything by myself without my mother's help, but it seemed to me that there was not one thing my children could do properly. My children's mistakes or cuteness looked like incompetence to me, and I would say to them, "What are you doing? Are you stupid?" And I yelled at them if they didn't clean up their mess or eat their food. My husband would sometimes say, "It's because they take after you." And though it was just an offhand remark without any malicious thought, it would hurt my pride and my heart would be filled with anger and resentment. At some point, I became irritated at the smallest things. I would scream at my children and even hit them. I would regret it immediately after and would apologize to them, but as these events continued to repeat, I couldn't take it anymore. I would continuously ask my husband for a divorce, and soon my two children began showing symptoms of anxiety. The older child became more sensitive and overly attached to people. One time she drew a picture of herself holding an axe aimed at herself. It was a serious shock. Our second child was slow with language and couldn't speak until he was 4. He also didn't get along very well with his peers. Once when someone saw him playing alone for several hours, mumbling incoherently to himself, they even asked me if he was autistic. I prayed a lot and tried to find any solution while consulting the people around me, but these problems felt like a black hole that was continually sapping my strength. At some point, I gave up on everything completely. I started drinking after finishing work and wouldn't come home until late at night. On the days I came home earlier, I would watch movies all night and wouldn't even give my family a single look. I had no desire to think about anyone else, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to escape this reality. After wandering like this for a long time, my spirit hit rock bottom, and I lost all my motivation to live. The faith I depended on until now didn't give me strength, and as my life became more and more meaningless, I started secretly planning to tie up the loose ends of my life and just kill myself. But at the edge of death, I felt like someone was asking me a question in my heart. Do you really believe in me? Am I really your Lord? All this time I had lived a very diligent spiritual life and had shared the gospel with confidence. But was Jesus really at the center of my life? As Jesus posed these questions to me, I became more and more confused. What on earth did he mean? I had always thought of Jesus as my Lord. Whenever I heard the verse, "By their fruit you will recognize them," it would prick me a little. But as I had experienced the works of the Holy Spirit in my life, I didn't think that it had anything to do with me. But when my life hit the bottom and I stood at the crossroads of life and death, I realized that my life's owner was myself, not Jesus. I had only said, "Lord, Lord," with my lips. I had not actually believed. When I learned this about myself, my life's problems started to resolve. I began to read the Bible again very closely, and I would seriously think about what it meant to believe in Jesus. I personally checked through the internet and various encyclopedias that the resurrection of Jesus was historically recorded. And when I looked at the figure of Jesus in the Bible, a shocking realization came to me. When Jesus first told his brother James that he was God who came down from heaven, James had said that he was crazy. But after meeting the risen Jesus, he had acknowledged Jesus as God and lived as his servant. After meeting the risen Jesus, the same disciples who had run away in fear of death had confessed that they could not stay silent about the things they had heard and seen. Then they all died as martyrs. They had seen the risen Jesus directly with their own 2 eyes. The moment they saw Jesus' risen body, they had realized, this man is God. Eternal heaven truly does exist. Death was just taking off the physical body and entering the eternal heaven. Therefore, death could not swallow them up. For this very reason, Christ died and returned to life so that he might be the Lord of both the dead and the living. For this very reason, Jesus had died and rose from the dead. He had died and risen from the dead to be my Lord. Just like he appeared before Thomas, he was showing me undeniable proof. At this, I repented the sin of not believing in Jesus and living as my own Lord all this time. Amen. I said, God, I was wrong. You gave me your Son and proof, but I did not believe in Jesus. Never again. Never again will I live as my own Lord. It was unbelievable to think about how I had lived while being deceived. I realized the reason for all my problems had been because I had been my own Lord. And the frustration and resentment I'd had in my heart had always been there. Because I was Lord of my life, I was intolerant towards myself and people when things didn't go the way I wanted. And it was the reason why I'd considered suicide. Though God had given the proof of resurrection, I had continued as my own Lord, and I knew I deserved to go to hell for this. But now I could stand in front of God once again because of his grace. The most surprising thing after I met the risen Jesus was that I could believe the Bible without any doubt. Because the resurrection was now clear to me, I could say amen to all the words of the Bible, and my eyes were open to the unseen spiritual world. Just as God was really alive, the devil too existed in reality. In the way that the devil had prompted Judas Iscariot to sell Jesus in the Gospels, he had also made me think of my dead brother's peaceful face every time I was troubled, which had made me long for death. In the past, I had been tricked into thinking that these were my own thoughts. But now that I only believe in the Word, I have become freed from these deceptions. Amen. Jesus also opened my eyes so that I could see myself. I realized how selfish I had been, giving everyone around me a hard time, and all my relationships have been restored since then. Though I had resented my husband, thinking that he was ignoring my feelings, I realized in front of the risen Jesus that I had been the problem. I wasn't to follow my husband because he was perfect, but because Jesus had risen, I obeyed the word that says that the husband is the head of the family. When Jesus opened my eyes, I saw my husband in a way that had not previously been apparent. Inside his blunt and rough outer personality was warmth and humor. Most of all, when I realized that my husband would give his life for me, I saw how I'd become God and judged him by my own standards, and I repented of being dissatisfied with my husband in the past. When I said to my husband, "I'm sorry that I gave you a hard time," he put his arms around my shoulders and replied, No, it was you who had a hard time." Hearing this, I felt even more apologetic, and my heart melted before the Lord's love, who had waited for me to the end. I have nothing but respect and trust for my husband now, remembering how he had waited quietly while praying and caring for me during those difficult times. Amen. When I received the unconditional great love of the Almighty God, I was able to accept my children as they were. I was so sorry for giving them a hard time by being selfish and holding them up to my own adult standards. When I asked them for forgiveness, they said brightly, "It's okay. That's not the real you," and comforted me instead. I was grateful to the church community for nurturing my children through the Word. When I saw the children through Jesus' eyes, they were so beautiful and even their mistakes were lovable and cute. Before, I couldn't understand why our youngest was so slow and lacking in his learning comprehension. But through him, I learned what it meant to accept someone as they are and wait for them as Jesus did for me. When spring comes, there are flowers that bloom early like apricot blossoms. But there are also flowers that bloom late. I realized that all flowers bloom at some point, just some later than others, and my heart grew to love my children as they were. As my 2 children and I became of one heart in a loving relationship, they became brighter and are more cheerful than anyone else. They are popular at school amongst their peers, and they boast about Jesus every chance they get. Also, if our children want to eat something specific, we often go out to eat, and I have become stress-free about cooking. I became a teacher who gives her heart to the children. Whenever I look at my students, they are so lovely and beautiful. Once while I was playing soccer with the boys, I kicked the air instead of the ball and fell over, and the children loved it. Though it was embarrassing and my rear was sore, the children's joy made me happy too. One time during English class, we listened to a song and were supposed to dance to it. But I was more into it than the students were, and the vice principal, upon seeing me, said, "The children must really like this. English classes should be fun." My students sometimes give me comments like, "Teacher, we can feel the love you have towards us. Thank you for always smiling brightly at us. These bring me great joy and gladness." Children are more precious than the whole world, and whenever I have the opportunity, I tell them how precious they are and introduce Jesus the Lord to them. I will continually share the gospel with the children so that they can live joyfully and freely in the gospel. Because of life's many problems, I was able to meet the risen Jesus at the edge of the cliff of death. Looking back, those many problems that I had been unable to cope with had been a blessed path that led me to meet Jesus. Now, after meeting and walking with the Lord, all my problems are solved, and I'm able to enjoy the abundant life of heaven. I'm thankful for everything. I regained my life because of Jesus, and I want to live it only for Jesus. Thank you.
If you'd like to see more stories about how the gospel changed lives, visit us at facebook.com/HMUOnlyJesus or Google us at HMU Only Jesus.